Well, big news for war-torn Ukraine. German media reports say that Chancellor Olaf Scholz has now decided to send Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine, while the United States may be supplying Abrams tanks. Berlin's move reportedly comes as a green light for Poland to send its Leopard tanks to Ukraine. More in this next report.
A source tells Reuters Germany will be sending Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine to help fight Russia's invasion. Kyiv has pleaded for Western tanks for months. The move would allow other countries like Poland to do the same, while Washington may supply Abrams tanks as well. There's been no official confirmation from Berlin or Washington, but Ukrainian officials were quick to hail what they called a game changer in the almost year-long war. Despite heavy losses on both sides, the front lines in the war have been largely frozen in place for 2 months. Kyiv argues heavy modern battle tanks would give it the firepower and mobility it desperately needs to recapture occupied territory in the east and south. Whether or not to supply those tanks has dominated discussions among Kyiv's Western allies in the past few weeks. The German-made Leopards were widely seen as the best option, available in large numbers and easy to deploy. But Berlin has been wary of moves that would cause Russia to escalate the war. Earlier on Tuesday, Poland had upped the pressure on Germany by formally requesting permission to allow the re-export of its Leopard battle tanks to Ukraine.
Peter Kuznick is a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. He's joining us now to talk about this latest development. Peter, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Some critics say that Germany sending the Leopard 2 tanks and the US also sending Abrams is a strong sign of solidarity, while others say arming Ukraine is fanning the war. What's your view on these two statements?
I think they're both right. It is a sign of solidarity, and it is fanning the flames of more and more war. There's been a lot of opposition, especially in Germany, but also in Hungary, also in Bulgaria. The interesting comment made by the Bulgarian president 2 days ago. He said, giving arms means putting out the fire with gasoline, agreeing that there will be many more victims and accepting the position that the war must be waged until the complete collapse of one side, which inevitably and gradually pushes us toward a global conflict with the possibility of nuclear self-destruction. So that's the concern that many people have. Yes, Ukraine needs to defend itself. However, pouring more and more weapons there is only going to fuel the fire here. And so the concern is that the Russians are going to respond as they have in the past by escalating themselves.
Right.
And then we get to this cycle of escalation where the sane people know that the solution has got to be negotiations. Even General Miley, the head of the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said this is going to end in negotiations. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to be able to win it militarily. And the Americans have been very hesitant to send these Abrams tanks. They've said the maintenance is too high.
Right.
The jet fuel is too expensive and difficult to get. The training is extensive on this, and that they are not going to be usable. However, the United States has agreed now to send them in order to get Germany to agree to send the Leopard 2 tanks.
Peter, let me ask you this. Now that Ukraine has got what it has been asking for a long time, what happens next?
Well, my concern, there was an article in the New York Times just a few days ago, said that American leaders are more increasingly open to allowing or encouraging Ukraine to invade Crimea. We know that that's a red line that is very, very dangerous. Increasingly, American leaders and European leaders have come to the conclusion that Putin's threats to use nuclear weapons are just a bluff. Mm-hmm. That's a very, very dangerous gamble. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists today announced that they're moving the hands of the doomsday clock 10 seconds closer to midnight. That's 90 seconds to midnight, the closest they've ever been. I thought they would move them even closer to midnight than that. So we're in a precarious situation. There are no voices for peace. The Russians I talk to have no interest in negotiation right now. The Ukrainians I talk to have no interest in negotiations right now. So where is the impetus for negotiations going to come from? Both sides want to win this on the battlefield. And that's not only is that horrific in terms of the human casualties, the human costs, but also the potential for this escalation to get out of control. President Kennedy said it best years ago at his American University commencement address. He said nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either a humiliating retreat or a nuclear war. To adopt that kind of course in the nuclear age would be evidence only of the bankruptcy of our policy or of a collective death wish for the world. And that's, it's this threat of a collective death wish for the world just is too dangerous to allow this to continue.
All right.
As General Milley says, we know where this is going to end up eventually. Let's get there now before there are tens or hundreds of thousands of more deaths, or possibly much worse than that.
Peter, finally and very quickly, there is also another concern. What will be the significance when neighboring Poland decides to also send the Leopard tanks, especially to Russia and to the war in Ukraine?
Fortunately, Russia has shown no inclination thus far to expand the war beyond Ukraine. So I don't think they're going to act aggressively against Poland, but I think they're going to pull out all stops inside Ukraine. If people think that Russia is doing everything it can against Ukraine now, they are seriously mistaken. Russia can escalate this militarily, and I'm afraid that's what's going to happen once these tanks get into Ukraine.
Professor of History and Director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University, Peter Kuznick. Peter, thank you very much for talking to WION today.
Thank you for having me.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.